The trustee's assistant slid the paper across the mahogany table, and my world stopped. Transfer complete. Education Trust. Beneficiary, Zara Okafor. The words blurred as my hands started shaking. My father sat 3 feet away, arms crossed, face blank like he was watching a weather report instead of destroying my future. Zara leaned back in her chair, examining her freshly done nails, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. The trust office felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe properly. The trustee, Mr. Adebayo, wouldn't meet my eyes. He shuffled papers on his desk, pretending to be busy with something important. 8 years of savings, every promise my mother made me keep, every sacrifice I'd made since I was 14, gone in one signature. My sister's name where mine used to be. My father's doing. My title is, my dad transferred my college fund to my sister, then I showed the trustee the restriction clause. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Aisha Okafor, and I was 22 years old when my father decided I didn't deserve my own future. I need to take you back 8 years to understand how we got here. I was 14 when my mother died from complications after surgery. The funeral was small, quiet, filled with relatives who whispered about how Dad would manage 2 daughters alone. 3 weeks after we buried her, Dad called me into his study. Mr. Adebayo sat in the leather chair by the window. Dad's voice was soft that day, almost gentle. Your mother wanted you to be the first Okafor to study abroad, he said. I'm setting up an education trust in her memory. For you, Aisha. You'll go to university overseas, get the opportunities she never had. Mr. Adebayo witnessed everything, took notes, nodded along. Dad signed papers while I cried grateful tears. That trust became everything to me. My North Star through every hard year that followed. The promise that kept me going when everything else felt impossible. Zara was 12 then, 2 years younger than me. She didn't understand what the trust meant at first, but I noticed small things over the years. The way she'd ask Dad why I had a special account, and she didn't. The way her face would twist when relatives mentioned my future education. Why does Aisha get everything? She asked once during a family dinner. Dad laughed it off, said we all had different paths. But Zara's resentment grew like mold in dark corners. By the time she turned 16, she'd stopped pretending to be happy for me. She'd make comments about how I thought I was too good for Nigeria, how studying abroad was just me trying to be better than everyone else. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just sibling rivalry. Normal sister stuff. I didn't realize then that her jealousy would become the weapon Dad would use to destroy me. At 18, I started working 2 jobs while attending university locally. Dad said we needed help with bills, that things were tight financially. I believed him because that's what daughters do. I worked retail shifts 6 days a week, tutored kids on weekends, sent money home every month. Zara focused on her Instagram, building her follower count, going to parties, dating guys with cars. Dad never asked her to contribute anything. When I questioned the difference, he'd say, "You're the responsible one, Aisha. I depend on you." Like responsibility was supposed to be its own reward. Like being reliable meant I didn't deserve rest. Relatives praised Zara's beauty, her style, her confidence. They told me I was so mature and so hardworking, which felt like consolation prizes. Dad would smile at Zara's accomplishments, her growing social media presence, her modeling gigs. But when I showed him my grades, my acceptance into programs, he'd just nod. Expected. Nothing special. 2 years ago, my acceptance letter arrived from a prestigious university in London. Full scholarship based on merit, partial funding needed for living expenses. I cried in the post office parking lot, called Dad immediately. He met me at home that evening, read the letter 3 times. "This is wonderful," he said, but his voice was flat. He pulled up the university website, calculated costs, frowned at his laptop screen. Zara walked in, saw my tears of joy, read the letter over Dad's shoulder. Why does she need to go abroad? Zara said, a local degree is good enough. This is just showing off. Dad didn't correct her, just kept staring at numbers on his screen like they were personally offending him. That night I heard them talking in the living room. That trust is a lot of money, Zara said. It could do so much here. Dad's response was too quiet for me to hear, but I felt something shift in our house. Something cold moving under the surface. The first semester payment was supposed to be released 6 months before I'd leave for London. I needed it to secure housing, pay deposits, handle visa costs. Mr. Adebayo kept delaying. Administrative issues, he said during our first call. Paperwork complications, he claimed in the second. By the third call, his secretary said he was unavailable and would call me back. He never did. Dad told me not to worry, said these things took time. The money's there, Aisha. Stop being paranoid. But paranoia has a way of being right sometimes. I started having dreams where I'd arrive at the airport and my ticket would be cancelled, where I'd get to London and have nowhere to sleep. I told myself I was being dramatic, that Dad wouldn't let me down. The trust was sacred. Mom's last gift. Dad had promised in front of witnesses. These thoughts kept me sane while Mr. Adebayo's office kept giving me excuses that made less sense each time. 3 months before my departure date, I came home early from work to find Zara sitting at my desk, my laptop open in front of her. Financial documents filled the screen. Bank statements, trust information, copies of the original trust deed. She didn't even look guilty when I walked in. You have no idea how much money is sitting in that account, she said, scrolling through files like they belonged to her. It's not fair. You're not even that smart. I grabbed my laptop from her hands, checked the browsing history. She'd been through everything, downloaded copies, probably sent them to herself. That's private, I said, my voice shaking. Zara stood up, smoothed her dress. Nothing in this family is private. Dad says that money belongs to all of us, not just you. She walked out before I could respond. I changed all my passwords that night, but the damage felt done. She'd seen everything, and now I knew she wanted it. Dad's behavior changed after that. Subtle at first, then obvious. He started talking about the trust differently. That fund represents your mother's hopes for our family, he'd say. Not just you. The family. When I reminded him that Mom specifically wanted it for my education, he'd wave his hand dismissively. Your mother would want what's best for everyone. Don't be selfish, Aisha. Selfish. The word stung every time. I was the one who'd worked since 18, who sent money home, who sacrificed social life and relationships to help our family. But somehow wanting my own education fund, the one my mother set up specifically for me, made me selfish. Dad rewrote history every chance he got. Claimed the trust was symbolic, that Mom would have wanted flexibility, that I was being entitled for thinking it was solely mine. I started recording our conversations. I didn't trust him anymore, and that realization hurt worse than any insult he could throw at me. 2 months before London, I had a scheduled meeting with Mr. Adebayo to verify the semester payment. The appointment took 3 weeks to schedule, and when I finally sat in his office, everything felt wrong. He was cold, almost hostile. Treated me like I was wasting his time instead of accessing my own money. These verifications are complicated, he said, not looking up from his computer. The trust has stipulations, requirements. We need to ensure compliance. I asked what stipulations he meant. Mom's trust was straightforward. I'd read it a dozen times. Mr. Adebayo's jaw tightened. Your father has concerns about the timing. Perhaps waiting a year would be more appropriate. My father had concerns. Not me, the beneficiary. My father. I left that office knowing something terrible was coming. The man who'd witnessed Mom's wishes, who'd promised to protect my future, was now taking orders from Dad. I was losing control of my own life, and nobody seemed to care. The breaking point came during a family dinner at Uncle Chitty's house. I went to the bathroom and heard voices coming from the study. Dad's voice. Zara's voice. I stood outside the cracked door and listened to them destroy me. That money will set you up for life, Dad said. A boutique, maybe a small restaurant. Something stable. Zara laughed, the sound sharp. When? Soon. Let me handle the trustee. Aisha won't know until it's done. My vision blurred. My knees went weak. I pressed my back against the wall and tried to breathe. They were planning to steal my future. Not maybe. Not theoretically. Actually planning it, discussing my money like I didn't exist. I walked back to the dinner table, sat down, ate rice I couldn't taste. Smiled at relatives who complimented Zara's dress and asked when I'd settle down and stop chasing foreign dreams. That night, I knew I was alone in this fight. Completely alone. 2 weeks later, Mr. Adebayo's assistant made a mistake. During a routine document request, she accidentally included a draft amendment in the envelope she handed me. I almost missed it, buried between copies of original trust documents. But there it was. An unsigned proposal to remove me as primary beneficiary and replace my name with Zara's. The document was dated 3 weeks earlier, stamped with Mr. Adebayo's firm letterhead, marked Confidential Victor Okafor Review. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the papers. This wasn't paranoia. This was real, documented proof that Dad and the trustee were conspiring to steal my trust. I photographed every page, uploaded copies to 3 different cloud services. When I confronted Dad that evening, he barely looked up from his phone. "You're being dramatic," he said. The trustee was exploring options. Nothing's decided. But I'd seen the signatures ready to be added. I'd seen my sister's name in black ink where mine belonged. Nothing's decided meant, we haven't stolen it yet. The final confrontation happened in our living room on a Sunday afternoon. I'd spent 3 days reviewing the draft amendment, barely sleeping, barely eating. I needed answers, and I needed them from Dad directly. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Mom wanted that money for me. You promised." Dad set down his newspaper, looked at me with eyes that felt empty. "You were never going to make it, Aisha. You dream too big. That university, that life you want, it's not realistic for someone like you." Someone like me. His daughter. The one who'd worked herself sick helping him. The one who'd believed every promise he'd made. Something inside me broke completely. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I locked myself in my room and cried for hours, the kind of crying that leaves you empty and raw. Every sacrifice I'd made, every hour I'd worked, every dream I'd built, he just called unrealistic. My own father didn't believe in me. Worse, he'd never believed in me. And now he was going to make sure I'd never get the chance to prove him wrong. 13. In my lowest moment, I remembered something. Mom kept copies of important documents in a locked box at the back of her closet. Dad never cleaned out her things, said it was too painful. I found the key in her jewelry box, opened the closet that still smelled faintly of her perfume. The metal box was heavy, filled with papers and photos. At the bottom, underneath old tax returns and medical records, I found it. The original trust deed. Not a copy. The original, signed document from 8 years ago. And handwritten in the margins, in Mom's precise script, was a clause I'd never seen in any of the copies Mr. Adebayo had shown me. The primary beneficiary shall be the first child to achieve qualifying university admission requiring trust fund support. Qualifying admission. First child. My admission to London was on record. submitted to the trustee's office 6 months ago. Zara had never applied to any university requiring the trust. She'd never even tried. This clause was ironclad, legal, binding, and it meant everything they'd planned was impossible. My mother had protected me even after death. I spent the next 3 days building my case like I was preparing for war. I photocopied every page of the original trust deed, highlighting the restriction clause Mom had written. I dug through old emails, found messages where Mr. Adebayo acknowledged receiving my admission letter and called it impressive and qualifying. I screenshotted conversations with Zara where she bragged about never wanting to go to university, how she was too smart for traditional education. I gathered bank statements showing every payment I'd made to help the family, while Zara contributed nothing. I organized everything into labeled folders, digital and physical copies, stored in multiple locations. Every piece of evidence was a brick in a wall that would protect me. Dad and Zara thought I'd roll over, accept their theft quietly. They'd forgotten that I was Mom's daughter too. And Mom taught me to be thorough, to be smart, to fight for what was mine. They were about to learn that lesson the hard way. My breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Amara, a former intern at Mr. Adebayo's office, reached out through LinkedIn. We'd met once during a document review 2 years earlier. Her message was careful, professional. I'm no longer with the firm. We should talk about your trust. We met at a cafe far from our neighborhood. Amara looked nervous, kept checking over her shoulder. What your father did was wrong, she said quietly. Mr. Adebayo accepted money from him, called it a consulting fee for estate planning advice, but I saw the emails. Your father paid him specifically to push through the transfer. My stomach turned. This wasn't just unethical. This was criminal. Bribery. Fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. I have copies of the payment records, Amara continued. I kept them before I left. I couldn't be part of it anymore. She handed me a USB drive. Everything's on there. Use it carefully. I thanked her, told her she might need to testify eventually. She nodded. I know. I'm ready. I had my witness. The inside person who could prove the conspiracy. Dad and Mr. Adebayo had made their fatal mistake. Walking into Mr. Adebayo's office with the original trust deed felt like stepping into battle. He looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. Aisha, we don't have an appointment today. I laid the original document on his desk, the restriction clause highlighted in yellow. I found my mother's original trust deed, the one with the clause you've been hiding. His face drained of color. He picked up the document, read the clause twice, set it down like it burned his fingers. This clause is outdated, he said, but his voice shook. It's symbolic, not legally binding after so many years. I pulled out my phone, showed him the email he'd sent 6 months ago acknowledging my qualifying admission. You called my London acceptance qualifying. You acknowledged it met trust requirements. That creates legal precedent that you understood and accepted this clause as binding. Mr. Adebayo loosened his tie. Your father has concerns. My father doesn't control this trust. My mother's wishes do. And you know it. I left his office knowing I'd shaken him. The next move was his, and he knew he had no good options left. I filed my complaint with the Financial Services Regulatory Authority 3 days later. Detailed everything, the restriction clause, Dad's payments to Mr. Adebayo, the draft amendment created without my knowledge, Amara's testimony about bribery. The regulator's office called within 48 hours. We're scheduling a formal hearing. This is a serious allegation. Dad found out somehow, probably through Mr. Adebayo. He came to my room that night, face red with anger. What have you done? What you forced me to do. You're going to destroy this family over money? You already destroyed it, I said. I'm just making sure you don't profit from it. Zara started a social media campaign, posting vague messages about jealous siblings and family betrayal. Her followers ate it up, sent me hateful messages calling me selfish, greedy, jealous of my sister's success. Let them think what they wanted. They didn't know the truth. But soon everyone would. The hearing date arrived by email, 4 weeks from today. I had 1 month to prepare for the fight that would determine everything. The house became a war zone. Dad stopped speaking to me except to make threats. You'll regret this. You're making powerful people angry. Distant uncles called, tried to convince me to drop the complaint. Family handles things privately, Uncle Chitty said. You're embarrassing your father. Aunt and Kem showed up unannounced, spent an hour lecturing me about respect and obedience. Your mother would be ashamed, she said. That was the line that almost broke me, but I held firm. My mother left instructions to protect me. I'm following them. Zara oscillated between tears and rage. One day she'd cry about how I was ruining her future, the next she'd scream that I was a selfish witch who wanted everything for myself. I stopped engaging. Let them exhaust themselves with anger. I spent my energy preparing for the hearing, reviewing documents with the lawyer I'd hired using money from my tutoring jobs. Dad tried one last manipulation, offered to negotiate a split of the trust funds. We'll each get something. Fair. But there was nothing fair about stealing someone's future then offering back a fraction. The hearing date circled on my calendar felt like both a countdown and a lifeline. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at dawn. Ironed my best suit, the navy one I'd bought for university interviews. I packed my evidence folder, checked and rechecked that everything was in order. Original trust deed. Mom's handwritten clause. Email acknowledgments from Mr. Adebayo. Bank records of Dad's payments. Amara's witness statement. Screenshots of Zara's social media posts admitting she never applied to university. My own admission letter to London. Every document was a shield, a weapon, a piece of the truth I was about to lay bare. Dad and Zara left for the hearing separately. I rode with my lawyer, Mrs. Ease, who'd become more than just legal representation. She'd become my advocate, my support, my reminder that I deserved to fight. You ready? She asked as we pulled into the parking structure. I nodded. They underestimated me. That was their mistake. We walked into the regulatory office building, took the elevator to the 5th floor, entered a conference room where everything would finally be decided. Dad sat on one side with Mr. Adebayo and their lawyers. Zara sat next to Dad, scrolling her phone. They barely looked at me. That was fine. They'd have to soon enough. The hearing panel consisted of 3 regulators, a woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Chair Okonkwo, and 2 younger men who took notes throughout. Mrs. Ease presented our case methodically, building the narrative piece by piece. First, the original trust deed with Mom's restriction clause. Chair Okonkwo read it carefully, asked Mr. Adebayo if he'd seen this document before. Years ago, he admitted. But I understood it as general guidance, not a binding restriction. Mrs. Ease smiled. Then perhaps this email will refresh your memory. She displayed his message acknowledging my qualifying admission and confirming the trust supported exactly the type of achievement the trust was designed to reward. Mr. Adebayo shifted in his seat. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Next came the financial records showing Dad's payments to Mr. Adebayo. Consulting fees, Dad's lawyer interjected. Perfectly legal estate planning advice. Advice that resulted in attempting to remove the legitimate beneficiary? Mrs. Ease countered. Advice given after monetary payments specifically designed to circumvent the trust's explicit restrictions? The room went quiet. Zara's phone screen went dark. Dad's jaw clenched tight. Then came Amara's testimony, read aloud by one of the panel members. Her statement detailed the pressure, the unethical conversations, the intent to defraud. The panel asked questions. Dad's lawyers objected, argued, deflected. But every answer just made things worse. After 3 hours of testimony, the panel asked for a brief recess. Dad tried to approach me in the hallway, but Mrs. Ease stepped between us. No contact with the complainant during proceedings. When we returned to the conference room, Chair Okonkwo's expression was severe. She read the panel's findings slowly, deliberately. The restriction clause is clear, binding, and was acknowledged by the trustee as recently as 6 months ago. The beneficiary met the qualifying criteria through legitimate university admission. The attempted transfer appears to be in direct violation of the trust's explicit terms. Mr. Adebayo slumped in his chair. Furthermore, evidence suggests potential breach of fiduciary duty and possible bribery. This matter will be referred to law enforcement for criminal investigation. Dad's face went white. Zara started crying. The trust transfer is declared invalid. All funds are to be restored to the original beneficiary, Aisha Okafor, immediately. Mr. Adebayo is suspended from practicing as a trustee pending investigation. Mr. Victor Okafor may face civil and criminal liability for attempted fraud. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process that I'd actually won. Mrs. Ease squeezed my shoulder. It's over. Zara ran from the room, Dad following close behind. Mr. Adebayo sat frozen, staring at his hands. Justice had come, and it felt exactly as heavy and sweet as I'd imagined. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Mr. Adebayo resigned from his firm within a week, his reputation destroyed. The local legal community talked about nothing else. A trustee taking bribes, violating fiduciary duty, it was the scandal of the year. Dad's reputation among our extended family collapsed like a building with no foundation. Relatives who'd pressured me to drop the case went silent. Some called to apologize awkwardly, claiming they hadn't known the full story. I didn't accept most of their apologies. They'd chosen sides without asking questions. Zara's social media presence took the biggest hit. Screenshots of her posts about never needing university education circulated online. Her sponsorship deals disappeared overnight. Fashion brands that had courted her went quiet. She deleted her accounts eventually, couldn't handle the public scrutiny. Dad moved in with Uncle Chitty, said he couldn't afford our house anymore. I stayed, paid the bills with my tutoring income, waited for the trust funds to be fully restored. Everything they'd tried to steal, everything they'd plotted to take, it all collapsed under the weight of their own greed and arrogance. Mom's careful planning had saved me. Her words, written in her own hand, had been the shield I needed. 3 months after the hearing, I stood in Heathrow Airport with 2 suitcases and my future ahead of me. The trust funds had been restored, verified, and transferred. My university housing was secured. My visa was approved. Everything Dad said I'd never achieve, I'd achieved anyway. Mrs. Ease came to see me off at the Lagos airport. "You're going to do incredible things," she said. "Your mother would be so proud." I cried then, the first tears I'd shed since the hearing. Not sad tears. Relief. Joy. Freedom. In London, I met my academic mentor, Dr. Adeyemi, who'd heard about my case through professional networks. "You fought for yourself," she said during our first meeting. "That takes courage most people never find." I made friends quickly. Real friends who chose me for who I was, not what I could give them. Kemi, from Ghana, who studied engineering. Amara number 2, Nigerian like me, who studied medicine. Chisholm, who taught me that chosen family was sometimes stronger than blood. My grades were exceptional. Everything Dad said I'd fail at, I excelled in. Every doubt he'd planted, I pulled out like weeds. Dad tried to reach out 8 months into my first year. An email with the subject line, "Can we talk?" I didn't open it for 3 days. When I finally did, it was exactly what I expected. Excuses. Justifications. I made mistakes, but I'm still your father. Family should forgive each other. I stared at that email for a long time before responding. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose Zara over me. You chose money over integrity. You chose betrayal over keeping Mom's promise. Those weren't mistakes. Those were decisions that showed me exactly who you are. I paused, then added, family doesn't steal your future and expect silence. Family doesn't gaslight you for wanting what's rightfully yours. You taught me that blood doesn't automatically deserve forgiveness. Character does. And yours failed every test. I pressed send before I could second-guess myself. His response came within an hour. You've become cold. I didn't reply. Cold wasn't the right word. I'd become protected, boundaried, clear about what I deserved and what I wouldn't tolerate. That wasn't cold. That was growth. That was survival. That was choosing myself for the first time in my life. And I wasn't sorry for it. 2 years into my degree, I stood in my small London flat, looking at acceptance letters for graduate programs. PhD offers from 3 universities. Research positions. Teaching assistantships. Opportunities Mom had dreamed of for me spreading across my desk like promises kept. I thought about that day in the trust office when my world nearly ended. When I saw Zara's name where mine should have been. When Dad sat there, blank-faced, ready to let me fall. I'd been so afraid that day. So certain I'd lost everything. But Mom's words had saved me. Her careful planning, her restriction clause, her understanding that I might need protection even after she was gone. She'd known Dad's weaknesses better than anyone. I kept the original trust deed framed in my bedroom, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof that someone had believed in me unconditionally. That somewhere in my DNA was a woman who'd fought to give me wings even when she couldn't see me fly. I called Kemi to celebrate the PhD offers. We made plans for dinner, talked about futures that felt limitless. Blood may tie you together, I told her later that night, but character decides who you call family. She raised her glass. To chosen family. To chosen family, I echoed. And to futures built on truth, protected by love, and earned through refusing to let anyone steal your dreams. Even when they wear your father's face. Especially then. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What does family mean to you? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.